You're listening to The Adventuring Party. Talking about gaming the Irish way.
And welcome to the party. My name's Eoin.
I'm Liam.
I'm Savage.
And I'm Shane.
And we are here today to discuss the foul depredations of plague gods. Or, disease in general, disease in your RPGs. What do you get out of disease in your RPGs? What happens when someone catches something? Is it infectious? Is it a good idea? Shane, take us off there. What are we talking about?
I'm very sorry to the listeners who are probably a few weeks into the COVID-19 isolation phase. Very sorry, but we couldn't help but feel that it was a topic that would rot away to nothing if we left it too long. So we figured we should deal with it now.
I made them do it.
Yeah.
My notes are largely useless because I misread the email and I thought it was plaque. So mostly about brushing your teeth. Yeah. But I'll try and wing it.
First line of defense. But specifically plague, not just I've got a sniffle, but everybody is dying. Oh no, what do we do? Help us. Oh wait, there's no one to help us. We've got to help ourselves because we're adventurers.
One of the difficulties is the traditional RPG super plague end up fighting is hilariously more lethal than any plague really in recorded history. Like the ones that are more lethal that get above kind of 10-20% mortality rate tend to be too lethal and kill off carriers before it really spreads. So in RPGs you often have this fantastical 90% or 95%, 99% fatality disease, which in reality would have started out in some small village somewhere, killed everybody, and then the WHO would have gone and go, my god, everyone's dead. Oh my god, we all got it, we all died. And the next team we're going, we're going to have biohazard controls going into this one, because clearly that last one was a terrible idea. But yeah, real plagues tend to have much lower fatality rates.
But they have huge impacts on the societies they occur in. And I think you can reflect that in almost any type of game. Now today I'd like to talk about fantasy plague, like magical plagues or plagues that happen where there's kind of magical healing or, gods and monsters, things like that. We can also look at plague in the modern world. I think we're getting a case study in it right now, so it isn't very hard to draw inspiration there if you're running a World of Darkness game or a Knights Black Agents or a GURPS game of any sort in the modern world. And then future plague. Like, will we ever sort of crack the war against those little germs and viruses that have plagued us? And do we take it into space? What does space plague look like? Or cyberpunk plague? Liam, any thoughts now that you've brushed your teeth?
Well, what interests me as well is when you look at different... Now, I'm mainly coming at this from an RPG point of view, but we can talk about some war game stuff and some board game stuff as well. But I would have played a lot of Ars Magica, and with Ars Magica, they kind of look at it from the lens of the day. So a lot of the diseases would not have been caused by germs, would not have been caused by viruses. Because what are they? What causes disease? Demons. Demons are what cause disease. And, miasmas cause disease. Imbalances of the humours, that's what causes disease.
Yeah, that was one of the things about Ars Magica, is that it was, what if the things that people in the medieval times believed were literally true? And it's
what a great idea.
Fertile ground for a sort of a crash course in just the past was indeed another country and maybe in some ways another planet.
I have yet to meet a PC who will not laugh when they're told that due to the imbalances of the humours, they must carry a rooster under their arm. Because it's a very hot-blooded animal. You need to bring up your... I can't remember which one of the humours is makes you kind of cold. You got a cold? You clearly you're not hot enough, so carry this rooster around. It's a hot-blooded animal. It's one of the treatments. Gaelic humours are bonkers.
But it is fertile ground for using something like that in the game. So we'll start with fantasy, say, or medieval, and yes, you could take those two tacks. You could either say it's actually true if you do rub a potato on it and bury it, then the boils will appear on the potato, or you can sort of use it as a way of explaining why the plague keeps spreading despite everybody doing what the apothecaries tell them, which is carry small farmyard animals around.
What I really like about it is that it's very easy for PCs to go, there's disease. Well, I know. What do we do? Well, clearly it's because the village up the way is throwing their feces in the river. So if we just get a clean source of water, then all this cholera we have will clear right up. But I prefer it to go, no, it's the science of the day, and it doesn't matter what you think with your modern brain.
Yeah.
You have to figure out how people of the day, what they would have thought it was, and how they would have gone about it.
So let's burn somebody.
Yeah, it's probably, like I said, it's probably a demon, and it's probably brought by that witch, so we're probably going to have to burn that witch.
I think, given the sort of context of a role-playing game, it is much more likely it was brought into town by those strangers who arrived last night and took a room in the inn, i.e. the adventuring party.
You can't trust a wizard.
There's
Trust a
the
wizard.
start of the scenario.
Yeah. There's a wizard and some heretic cleric of some god we've never heard of, and that guy there with the lots of knives, clearly a thief.
Oh, yeah. And everyone knows thieves spread plague.
Yeah. But it is interesting to think that the ignorance of the people about how plague is spread is a feature, not a bug, in terms of the dramatic weight of your game. The fact that people don't know what to do and are acting semi-irrationally in their, in theory, rational attempts to save their families is fuel for all kinds of drama. As the peers suddenly have to be on their toes, convincing people that no, it wasn't us, and no, it wasn't the local band of goblins. It was this, it was that, and it also means that you can very easily use it as a vector to bring in puzzles into the game. Like, was it the disease god? Was it a demon? Should we be using magic to track it down, or should we be using those 3 points of heal that the thief put out into his skill points because he had skill points left over?
Prayer, mate. Prayer is your only answer.
Which is often true in any magical game. Any parties could go, we've got a healer, we'll be fine. I think the interesting thing about plague, of course, is that in any setting where it occurs, the point is it has overwhelmed the ability of whatever sort of healthcare or healing sort of subclass there is to deal with it. Like, the sheer numbers just escalate to the point where it doesn't matter if you're calling upon the power of a god or simply pouring vinegar in your water. It's not going to be enough. And that's when I think you can really start to have some fun with it.
There's only so many monks and paladins to go around, They can't do everything.
Exactly. Yeah, it's absolutely a numbers problem.
Well, the whole thing with in most versions of D&D, monks and paladins are generally immune to disease. Which contributes to the entire thing.
They're not immune to angry mobs. And that's the other thing that tends to happen. Why don't you have it? Well, if you don't have it, you must be withholding a cure, or you must have made some deal with the devil. Get 'em, boys. I think players are always going to look for ways to be immune or set aside from the problems of the common masses. But this is a great opportunity to make everybody's problems their problems. So it's not good enough that they've decided to head off down a lost mine and recover a Dwarven King's gold. There's something bigger than themselves. There's something bigger than their own ambitions that has to be dealt with now, and everybody's looking for answers. And where they can't find answers, they're probably going to look for scapegoats.
Well, now, I just want the treasure out of that mine. Savage, why should I care that there's a plague outbreak in the local village?
You're dragging stuff up out of old mines. That's probably a vector for plague. There's absolutely no way we're going to let you get away with that. Burn 'em, boys.
Look, I'm a level 12 adventurer. I can massacre this entire village on my own. Why should I care?
Well, you have a DC 15 fortune save for each one you kill because you're exposing yourself to their fluids.
Plague, yeah.
Like I said, I'm a monk. I'm immune.
You'll roll ones eventually.
I'm a monk. I'm immune.
I think your big problem here is you are hitting people with disease who understand far more about disease than almost anybody in recorded history.
Sure, but
You have to look back. No. But here's what the problem. People nowadays understand germ theory. Even if they don't, if they don't really know a lot about it, they understand the basics of germ theory. If they encounter disease in a fantasy RPG, they will take basic germ theory precautions, even if their characters don't really know that. You see, inexplicably, alcohol will start getting sprayed over hands and stuff, and they will avoid touching, the dead person, and there'll be all sorts of tricks used. Fantasy diseases, if you want them to be scary, have to be incredibly difficult to understand. And that's what scares players. They don't know how people are getting sick, they don't know why they're getting sick, they don't know who's getting sick, until it's too late. And that's how you actually make it scary. You do not make the transmission method the same as the standard diseases transmission method if you want it to be intimidating and scary. Because if it's just a disease, you've put a label on it and the players go, what abilities to counteract disease, we'll use them. I'll give you an example. In L5R, there were two big kind of magical diseases that happened. The first one was the wasting disease, which happens when the first black scroll is opened and just people get sick and die, and then there's a lot of bodies around for people to turn into zombies. That's a different threat. So basically there's a plague, it creates a bunch of dead bodies, and then the necromancers come along and go, well, there's tons of zombies here, let's raise a bunch of rise, and they basically raise huge numbers of zombies, and that becomes a threat in the campaign. But that's a very understandable threat. It's a nice, dangerous threat, but it's an understandable threat. The other magical plague in it was the plague of the Shooting Doji, who were spirits of seduction that Fulang summons. And each one of the Shooting Doji, basically, if you're exposed to them, they take command of your body and use it to inflict, to bind more people to the Shooting Doji. So there's their fear, desire, and regret. Desire is spread by sight, so if you see one of them, you become one of them. Desire is by touch. If they touch you, you become one of them. And regret is sound. If you hear one of them, you become one of them. If you spring that on a player, they are going to be freaked out. Freaked out.
Yeah, I do agree. You do. I mean, it's usually games of high fantasy. You do need to up everything. Everything has to be amped up, and certainly bypassing the normal precautions that sort of 20th century, 21st century people might take is definitely one of the first things to do. So magical plagues or things that have weird transmission vectors like the things you described are great ways of...
Like, imagine there's a plague that turns people into zombies and they're like, okay, well, how's it doing? And then there's a scratching on the door and one of the NPCs goes up and listens at the door and then he turns around and turns into a zombie and you're like, oh my god, what happened?
Yeah, run, get upstairs.
So something's really wrong. I don't understand what happened there. But you come up with your own rules and they gradually explore what those rules mean. Much in the same way you fight disease in real life. You figure out what's causing it. You figure out what you can do. You tackle it that way. You have to approach it like that. You can't just kind of hang the bells and whistles of disease out. You actually have to go look into what is the core of disease. Why is it scary? Because anybody can get it.
It builds an interesting aspect of investigation into it, doesn't it?
Yes. Like victim trace, you're actually contact tracing. You're going, okay, who did this person get in touch with? Because we need to figure that out right now before it spreads any further. And you basically look at it. It's not just like, oh, we're fighting monsters and we make fort saves every so often. That's what's different. It's no, this is a different problem you need to approach now. Like the idea of a long latency period is a terrifying one in RPG, but it makes it so that it's okay. This person was here, we need to find out where they were, and then we need to find who they possibly infected. And we've got to corral them to stop it spreading any further. And that becomes the game. If you want to play around with it, you've got to play around with the same sort of problems. Weird transmission methods, figuring out how the disease works, figuring out who's been infected, and trying to control and isolate that. Because that's what it's about. It's like if you're fighting guys, you have to make fortitudes every while. It's just a standard game with one different tweak on it. You can make it a completely different, much more intimidating game that way. If you actually go and,
I think there's good story in two things. And one is if you change the control. So diseases are generally, they're this mindless thing and they just happen. But if you look at what a lot of, say, 40k and what Warhammer Fantasy does, is that you have this whole faction of chaos that's all about disease. Nurgle, the Nurgleites, they control disease, they spread disease. They also grant succor from disease. And they also can control and increase the speed at which diseases go and which they outbreak. And that in itself, so turning it from this blind force to this person's got this purple tongue disease that killed them in minutes. Normally that takes days. Like what? And that's a tropical disease. How? What? That can add a lot of stuff. And I found even as well with taking the other end, one of the best kind of campaign arcs that I played in was in Twilight 2013. And, a nearby town has an outbreak of pneumonic plague. It's a post-apocalypse. We don't have gram-negative antibiotics. What do? This is a disease with proper care. You're probably looking at a 30-40% fatality rate.
Ooh, that's an awful lot of real estate going without claimants. So will we move ahead into the present or the future in terms of how we might use plague in a game? I think so. Eoin, brilliant ideas. I might steal a few of those and some good examples. I think L5R in particular kind of brought a very interesting spin to how you might use diseases and afflictions.
I do think the idea of the disease as a sort of puzzle is a good advance take. It doesn't have to be necessarily... People usually think of puzzles as something you solve and then move on, but this could be like a mystery that's is spread over the course of a campaign and is also trying to, eat your flesh or whatever.
I think it's important that it's a puzzle, but it's a puzzle that you get all of the answers to. I think where disease can really come very good for storytelling is where the players lose some agency. Not all agency, because people hate it when they lose all agency, and if the thing's just a runaway show, then they're not going to have any fun. But if they lose just enough that they feel a little bit helpless in this situation, I think that's where you can get really good story out.
But also there's the question of, do you want there to be a cult of Nurgle or a cleric of Incabnobulus or whatever, who is the villain behind the plague? You should always consider whether you want there to be a source that if you beat this, it might not solve the plague, but it solve the plague for the player's story.
The problem with there being a definitive source is there's a definitive source with definitive hit points, and definitive hit points can be attacked and killed.
Yeah, as I say, it's something that might make sense narratively, but systemically that's...
So I think all of those things stack up in really interesting ways, and my gut reaction is to say yes, all of them. That you have civil unrest, that you have a plague that you have to kind of figure out what the rules are and follow it back to the source, or determine how people are catching it. And then sometimes, yes, that you should have a guiding intelligence that has brewed up this weaponized version of the purple tongue and has directed it to their own ends. And yeah, you get to kick in the door of their citadel and put an end to their dastardly campaign of plague before they can wipe out the entire country. Like that's feels to me like a really solid progression, a like really good way of taking players from things being sort of normal to things getting bad to getting a grip on it, because damn it, somebody's got to do something, to finally getting their hands around the neck of whatever vile poxmaster brewed up this thing and putting an end to it in the most visceral and satisfying way possible. Like that for me would be sort of the way I'd play it, I think.
It's probably more satisfying than kind of the reality of how a lot of diseases spread.
Very true.
People are selfish jerks. Acting in their own best interest.
Listeners, there is no way to solve COVID-19 by wrapping your hands around the neck of someone. So this is very much a how to do it in RPG, not a how to treat a disease in real life.
Look, COVID-19 is just kind of like to me, it kind of summarizes what was already happening. So we've all known for decades that climate change is happening, and it's radically altering the planet. And has it cut back on any of our lifestyles? No, it hasn't. Not really. Every now and again, people might get the bus or something and feel better about it. But we've all just kind of tottled along, going along through it anyway. And the same with COVID-19. COVID-19 was out there. Oh, it's fine. It's just in China. Okay, there's a couple of cases here and there. Oh, there's a couple of cases in Ireland now. It's grand. Sure, I'll keep going as usual. And now it's actually come to big sacrifices for people because it's on our doorstep.
And the mundanity is that it is serious and also something that you just kind of have to suffer through and hope you don't succumb to. But I do like the idea of a world where you could strap a sword to your back, load your magnum, hop on a cargo plane to China and track down the ancient Lord of Bats who started this thing. And give him a good going over. Let's take it. The modern world, I think we'd land most often on zombie plague as the kind of one of the places you use it, or otherwise you
can't ignore the plague when it's scratching at your door.
Yeah.
But I think in the case of the zombie apocalypse, that's the plague is sort of an excuse rather than a accurate reflection of a plague. It's using the trappings of a plague to explore a what if the entire world had turned against you scenario.
Well, there's that as well, and there's also there's the horror of losing your agency, like that you become one of these mindless things.
Mm-hmm.
So let's scoot into the future then, where I think there's actually a whole bunch of interesting ways of twisting this topic. Because you say we take a very heavily cybernetic future, and we're already, when we look at things like Shadowrun and Cyberpunk, we have viruses and kind of things like that we can look at, and memetics are often talked about in the same sort of way as transmittable diseases, and I think you could really play with that. In fact, I'm pretty sure things like Snow Crash and Neuromancer, books by Neil Stevenson and William Gibson, respectively. Like, I think sort of part of their entire premise is that software and sort of integration of man-machine leaves us open to an entirely different class of plague, the computer virus. Anyone can think of any good ways of sort of using that?
Well, Shadowrun has had a couple of big kind of world-altering events where you've basically had where the entire net needs to be reset and started again because there was some cataclysm of some either machines taking over or a virus gets out and wipes out, and a kind of a half computer, half spiritual virus comes out and wipes out all of the sorcerers or all of the casters of one kind or another.
A uniquely odd setting, as we said.
Well, it's neuromancer with magic.
Of course, maybe it's not us who have to catch one of these nasty digital infections, but it's simply the machinery. So you can arrive at either a kind of an iRobot, Rise the Machine scenario, or some sort of cybernetic plague that devastates all of our sort of future systems to the point where we're thrown into a kind of a Mad Max post-future apocalypse.
I mean, it's not that far-fetched. I mean, when people catch diseases, their behaviour is altered already. Like, if you catch rabies, you can become crazy violent and start trying to bite people,
But there is also sorry.
You had a couple of very strong, I thought, points to cover on this one. Do you want to go through your list of 4 or your list of 5?
Well, I just wanted to raise the point in a sci-fi environment, particularly if you're doing something like Star Trek, where you have the resources of a starship and crew and organs. In such cases, it might be easier for the players to be the solution to the plague in a way other than killing the god of plague.
Just don't mention that Next Generation episode.
Which one? There's a lot of questionable Next Generation episodes.
The one where they get that disease and they all turn Randy.
Oh yeah.
They all turn what now?
Randy.
Yeah.
If you want to really flip the script on this, the players should be infected with the disease, and they're infecting other people, and they need to find a way to accomplish what they need to accomplish without infecting too many other people.
Yeah.
Flip the script in that stuff,
Yeah, that's a good one, actually.
That was one of your.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No,
No,
that
I
was one of
was
your
saying that
points, wasn't it?
Yeah. I've put a few points is the different ways that PCs interact with disease. And turning into something else is one of them. We all often you often see that the idea of being turned into a werewolf or a vampire being compared to having a disease like this. But the idea of the disease as a source of change, that maybe it's just causing you to have -2 in all your rolls, but maybe it's changing in other ways, and like maybe it makes you infectious. Maybe it means on the full moon you get extremely hairy for some reason.
I mean, if I was a security officer, I could see advantages in becoming half a foot taller, covered in armor plates, and being able to shoot acid out my mouth.
Yeah. This the thing is, you can almost make it a temptation, in that the plague.
Okay, yeah.
The plague makes you less human and less able to interact with society, but it gives you a different kind of power. It
+2 strength and con, -2 intelligence. That's alright, I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
Can't go out in the sun.
Then it keeps going.
I always thought vampire chickened out with their mechanics for turning people into vampire. I really would have been tempted to have... if you bite someone, one of two things is happening. You kill them by sucking all their blood, or they're turning into a vampire. It is your choice about how you handle this. Mm-hmm. But those are the only two things that happen. And by the way, if you want to be able to use your powers, you need blood.
Right.
So I get to work. Now, I would put a far starker choice on it. If I want my powers, or I want to stay alive as a vampire, I have to drink people's blood, and that means I am either killing them, or I am turning them into another vampire. And should be prohibitions about making new vampires.
But that changes it from kind of the dark, misunderstood, Children of the Night thing to being actual horror, which really wasn't what Vampire was about.
No, Vampire was being superpowers but wearing goth clothing.
Yeah.
Whereas, actual get into... If you really want to talk about, I think that would be a far less attractive game for people. Because they would be like, oh, this is not good.
I'm actually a monster.
I'm actually the monster here, Not just kind of the monster.
Yeah, but you could... having that sort of a temptation where, maybe... Let me think of it. There was a version for the Blades in the Dark game that I saw. A fan made up this thing. Now, just to give the listener some context, Blades in the Dark uses a dice pool system where you're generally rolling 2 or 3 dice on a skill, maybe only 1 or 2 if you're not skilled in it, and taking the best of them, and you're really looking for 6s to get a clean success, and if it's a 4 or 5, it's only a success with a cost. So it's very tempting to get extra dice on your rolls, and GMs are encouraged to offer devil's bargains to offer extra dice. But I saw a really interesting system that they had for werewolfism or vampirism or similar things, where you if you're infected with this, you always have a dice that you can roll. And if you roll that dice, you choose whenever you want to roll this dice. Whenever the chips are down, you need that extra dice. You can choose to roll it, but if you roll 6 on it, now you have 2 dice, and if you call this power again, you roll both dice, and if either of them comes up as a 6, then now you have 3 dice, and at a certain point, your power becomes so powerful that it overpowers you. I think it's like if you have 6 dice, you just. The GM just takes over and narrates, okay, you turn into a werewolf and start killing the rest of the party. And I really like that because it puts the onus on the player to say, oh, I really need some dice for this thing that I've gotten myself into. Oh, but I'm going to risk it this one more time. And that's I think is an interesting way of putting it, of the plague as sort of a temptation. A sort of power that they're messing with. And in fact, you could almost say that your villains who have the secret plague that they're exposing the country to, maybe that's what they're doing. They're playing around with a weapon they can only kind of control.
Interesting. I do like that sort of you're just accumulating more and more plague dice until you're just festering. So I think actually we've had sort of planned to discuss a few other things. Like obviously, disease has been a powerful enough theme for other kinds of games. Pandemic being the board game that most often springs to mind. I can't but help think an awful lot of people have pulled Pandemic off their shelves in the last couple of days to dust it off and give it another go.
There was a stack of them. I was in Gamers World earlier on stocking up because I don't think we'll be leaving the house much over the next month or two, and they had Pandemic up on the front desk, and I think it was flying off the shelf.
Pandemic is a really, really good board game for just explaining just how difficult it is to manage disease in these levels. Heartily recommend.
It's
even if it is a bit too close to the bone right now.
It gives you hope. You can win Pandemic. Admittedly, there are some flips on which you can't win Pandemic, but you can win Pandemic. You could. It's if you're organised, if you work together. You can win Pandemic. You can also be the terrible person who causes everyone else to fail.
But remember, you don't beat the disease in Pandemic. You hold it off long enough to get a vaccine together.
Absolutely.
This is it.
Sound messaging.
And that's kind of the note I think I'd like to land on now. We're not really talking about this because...
We haven't even talked about wargaming.
Okay, hold on. Roll that one back. So, wargaming, off we go.
So, I guess... in the context of a battle in wargaming, I don't think I've really seen it as much of a factor other than... like you can have an Urgalites in 40k and they make an attack and they may as well be firing a bazooka at you because although it might be called a puss sack or something like that, it really has the same effect as firing whatever attack at you. So from that point of view, I don't think it really does much.
Yeah, it's sort of just a slightly different mechanic for causing hurt and making a certain unit dangerous to attack or something. Although I do find it interesting that a few other war games seem to use this theme of disease as a weapon. So it's definitely got some kind of appeal.
I'd be interested in hearing from our listeners who were into historical wargaming because, in our modern day, we're kind of used to the concept that what kills people in war is bullets, bombs, grenades, mortars, airstrikes, That's what kills people. When I think it was the American Civil War was the first war where more people died from the actual conflict than died from disease. Like generally, if you went campaigning, you lost most of your troops through disease. So I don't think that you could run a historical war game where that wasn't factored in.
Yeah, you can't really ignore it. Like I guess probably campaign games are where it really starts to bite. So you've got your list of guys you're going to put in the field, and at the start of the game you roll to see how many of them are out due to cholera.
Or even just, there was a skirmish last week, a bunch of them got injured, and then most of them, a good half of them died from infection.
I don't know of any systems. I'm not as familiar with wargaming as some of the other party members. Presumably someone has tackled it. I guess it does come down to how much does it offer the game experience, for want of a better word, what fun can be derived from it? Or is it just always going to be, it's always going to be a penalty? Like, no one goes out looking for diseases to make Faustian pacts with in the real world.
I think real life disease is just depressing for the most part. It's not that fun or gameable in some ways. I think you have to put some sort of distance. Like, you can do lots of body horror and stuff with it, but I mean, people don't really enjoy that. So getting too real is probably, you want a little bit of distance and kind of play around with it a bit away. Make it scary, make it unknown, but don't make it too thing. Has anybody done a war game where you play the body's immune system fighting off a bacterial invader? Because that seems like it's at least somewhat interesting.
I guarantee there's a board game based on it.
Honestly, the closest I can think to, this is a bit of a stretch, but there was the Defense of the Craft World board game that GW put out about 25, 30 years ago, where an Eldar Craft World is fighting off a Tyranid invasion. And really, could anything else be? I mean, that's a very good way of thinking of disease. It's the Nids coming in, trying to infest your Craft World, and your plucky defenders in all their different sort of garb, fighting them off. Howling Banshee and sort of Wraithbone Guardian antibodies, struggling to hold the ship against this Xenos plague. Yeah, bit of a stretch, but that's the one that comes to mind.
I know Cytosis is the cell biology board game. I think they had a virus expansion for that. But just let me see if they had something else like it.
Okay.
Not too many. Not too many.
Well, as you said, Owen, yeah, in the real world, disease tends to be something of a bummer. We didn't decide to talk about this tonight to bring you guys down. We know that pretty much the entire world now is dealing with a very serious crisis. We game in part to gain some control over the things we fear, be it the dark, be it death, be it implacable disease. And we set up our games so that we have a chance of winning. And we usually do so by working together. There is an awful lot of good advice from reputable sources about how we should all act to protect ourselves, to protect each other in the coming few weeks and possibly months ahead. Whatever your local government body, your health authority is, I'd encourage you to go and listen to them, and listen to them closely. And don't be persuaded by stories from this and that person about this and that situation or cure or potential threat. Find credible advice about real world diseases, especially the ones we're dealing with at the moment. And to alleviate the fear and the doubt and the uncertainty, find a distraction, like gaming. Find like-minded people with which you can share a laugh, have a bit of fun, and go and punch a bat god.
And practice some social distancing. If you've got any, ideas of yourself, or want to rail us, or want to, suggest things we could do, ways to tackle this stuff, hit us up on our Discord, our Twitter, or our Facebook page. But for now, this party's over.
You've been listening to The Adventuring Party. You can find us at theadventuringparty.net. There you'll find show notes for the episode you just listened to, and you can find links to other places on the internet where we tend to hang out. We are on Facebook at The Adventuring Party. You can follow us on Twitter at AdventuringPTY, or if you head for YouTube, you can search for The Adventuring Party. If you'd like to shout at us, then head over to speakpipe.com/The Adventuring Party and leave a short message. If you want to contact us by email, send us a note to party@theadventuringparty.net. Now, this whole kit and caboodle has been released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike version 3 license. Anyways, give us a like, give us a subscribe, please share this episode or any other episode you've liked with your friends, and we hope we'll see you back here next week.